Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel, our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place, RTV.network.
Welcome to another episode of Connect Caribbean Report here on Callaloo Alliance Media, our TV network. Last week, we explored the theme Managing and Implementing Change in the Caribbean Single Economy, a thought-provoking discussion on the structural and policy shifts needed to truly integrate our region. One of the resounding takeaways was that implementing change with a single economy is a complex undertaking, one that requires more than just policy framework. It demands a people-centered approach. This brings us to today's episode, Movement of Caribbean People for Economic Growth. The free movement of our people is one of the most significant drivers of regional change and progress. Without this mobility, whether for labor, business, or cultural exchange, we cannot hope to realize the full potential of a Caribbean single economy. Today, we'll dive deep into how the movement of people unlocks opportunities for economic growth and regional development, and what more can be done to overcome the challenges that hinder this crucial pillar of integration. So get ready for enlightening discussion as we dive into this critical topic to uncover what it takes to build a Caribbean economy that thrives on shared goals, innovation, and resilience. I'm Jennifer Hyland, your co-host here on Connect Caribbean Report, where we are bridging the islands, uniting communities, and unlocking new possibilities for the entire region. So stay tuned as we dive into the stories and innovations that are shaping the Caribbean's bright future. We're covering here on Connect Caribbean Report. So we'll be right back with Connect Caribbean World with Ambassador Thomas taking the big picture view on the movement of people within the context of Connect Caribbean Ferry Initiative. We'll be back right after these messages.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It's taking longer and longer for the unemployed to find jobs. Over 40% of unemployed Americans have been searching for a job for at least 15 weeks. That is rare in the post-World War II era. Firms are not laying off workers, but also not hiring much, leading to a decline in new hires. Knowledge worker roles like marketing and financing are slowing down, while hands-on positions in healthcare and education are growing. The head of Campbell's, formerly known as Campbell's Soup, is leaving to lead the Washington Commanders NFL team. Mark Klaus will remain in his position at Campbell's until the end of January. Mick Bakehausen, who leads Campbell's Meals and Beverages business, will take over as CEO February 1st. Campbell's also reported earnings yesterday. The company said sales of soups declined because of the timing of Thanksgiving this year. Futures point to a higher open for Wall Street. The Nasdaq and the S&P are at new record highs. Gina Cervetti,
Welcome back to Connect Caribbean Report, and we're changing roles here in Connect Caribbean World. I'm going to be asking Ambassador Dr. Andre Thomas a few questions relative to Connect Caribbean Ferry Service and the theme of our program this afternoon. So I want to start by talking about the establishment of Pleon Group Inc., the parent company of Connect Caribbean, together with its advisory arm. Both organizations have been playing a critical role in the formulation of regional initiatives that support Caribbean integration. The vision of the integration of the Caribbean has been at the forefront of CARICOM and its member states since 1973 with the signing of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, creating the common market 50 years ago, just over 50 years ago. And in 2001 with the revised treaty, which sought to expand regional integration even further with the aim of creating a single market economy. Well, according to a 2011 report conducted by the UWI Institute of International Relations, Caribbean integration has faced many hurdles, including the revelation that regional integration does not figure highly on the agenda of many sections of the Caribbean private sector for a number of reasons. But Pleon Group took a bold initiative, Ambassador Thomas, to address this regional challenge. And we know that the CSME framework emphasizes the free movement of goods, services, capital, and people across member states. So my question to you, how does Connect Caribbean Ferry Service align with and support this massive vision, particularly in facilitating the movement of people and goods across the Caribbean? Can you give us a your big picture vision on this initiative?
Thank you, Jennifer, for the question. Great question. Now, when you look at it, you got to look at three different channels. The first channel is the channel of the possibilities that the CSME has created. So the CSME has created the possibility whereby within the Caribbean region, people and goods can freely move, creating significant economic growth and cultural exchange. That's an amazing vision. However, the second area is the challenges of that. Now, the challenges are number one, we're island nations. Therefore, our bridges, our roads have to be through the sea or through the air, and air is too expensive. Number two, we are small island states. Therefore, the markets are very small. So you move from one country that has 100,000 people to another country that has 200,000 people. So you're dealing with very small markets. And then number three, access to capital is restricted. Now, and then number four, you're in a region that is prone to shocks from hurricanes, shocks that because we are tourism-based economy, any recession in the nations that supply tourists to us have an impact with us. Now, the combination of those four things, plus inter-island regulations that are actually different, those five things have created a challenging environment to actually create a maritime structure that connects the Caribbean together. And that's why it's not been done. So at Pleon, we have looked at this and decided to take a strategic approach to this, to study it and create an approach that's built on travel, cargo, and e-commerce, and the movement of agriculture to solve this problem.
Absolutely. Understood. And really appreciate that you put that big picture out there for everyone to understand the basis. When we talk about the movement of people and the CARICOM, heads of government, has recently, I don't have the date here, but certainly has given the ability for Caribbean nationals to move freely to work and work, play, and live across the Caribbean. So the Connect Caribbean ferry service really has to consider then when you talk about labor movements and persons who want to experience cultural exchange and so forth. How is Connect Caribbean ferry service viewing this information, this provision that has been made by how are you working around that to enable, for example, the employment of persons within the region from far markets? How are you envisioning that working, especially with the idea of integration of people and workforce implementation?
Okay, so the first thing we've done, we've had to create a business model and that creates enough volume to justify the business. And then with that foundation in place, you then create routes that make sense with vessels that make sense, tapping into the existing revenue models that are within the region and bringing the partners that understand the various focuses of our business: cargo, travel, and e-commerce, and also agriculture. So say, for example, we starting from say Barbados, we have 3 hubs. Barbados, which is our travel hub, Trinidad, which is our manufacturing hub, and the USVI, which is our hub that connects the US and the Caribbean. So these are 3 major hubs. Now, these 3 hubs connect to the existing revenue flows that we have in the region. Example, there's a great manufacturing hub within Trinidad. So you create routes that maximize that. So say, for example, we will start in Barbados with the routes that go from Barbados to St. Lucia, to Grenada, to Trinidad, to Dominica, and also to St. Vincent. Now, our USVI route would go St. James, would go St. John, St. Thomas, St. Croix, but would also go to St. Kitts and Nevis, it would go to Antigua, and then it would go to St. Martin, but then it would go to Dominica, where so Dominica and Antigua become hubs, interconnected hubs, where folks can leave one ferry and go to the next ferry. So what we're doing is really creating an environment and creating routes that leverage the existing revenue flows, cargo flows, and people flows within the region. And that's the approach that we have taken. And we're looking forward to a first quarter launch next year.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I mean, you mentioned quite a number of things, and one of the issues that I have that comes to mind if we're talking about labor force, migration, and so forth, we definitely are looking forward to the next segment where John really will speak about regional visa regime, obviously because USVI is a US territory. So we're going to come back after this commercial break with John Kodenin, and I hope Chris is able to join us as well to talk about these factors as it relates to the movement of people in connecting the USVI, which is a US territory, and the rest of the Caribbean. But stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
With the Bloomberg Small Business Report, I'm Tracy Jonke. How many of the supplies required to run your business are made in China? more than some small business owners believed before they began to examine potential impacts of tariffs proposed by President-elect Trump. Laurel Orley is a co-founder of Nashville-based snack maker Daily Crunch. She tells the AP her company does not import very much, but that was going to change next year. Daily Crunch had planned to move production of its snack bags to China for a cost savings of 5 cents a bag. Now Orley says she does not know if the change will save the company any money. And even the threat of tariffs is raising the cost of doing business. Orley says so many companies are trying to get ahead of tariffs by rushing to import goods now, warehouse availability is becoming limited and warehouse prices are going up. And that's the Bloomberg Small Business Report.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Connecting the Dots as we look to explore the relationship between what we're doing internal in the Caribbean and linking it to the major trading partner with the U.S. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, for joining me this afternoon as we start looking at what are the degrees of difficulty and how do we go from this current state of trade efficiency and effectiveness that we're trying to do inter-Caribbean to how do we actually engage the large market potential in the United States. So in connecting these dots, there are trade barriers that exist today. There are trade agreements that we have among the Caribbean nations that allow this CARICOM visa that was talked about in the first segment and how people can move freely with these ferryboat services. There becomes a problem, however, when we start talking about coming into the United States territory of the Virgin Islands, because we don't have that current exchange to be able to have a visa ability for people to come. So we have some investment and growth that we're trying to do, but in the regional unity, there are several conversations that are going on right now in order to try to facilitate the things that are necessary to connect these dots. So we have, for example, meetings that Governor Bryant, who has signed the MOU for the public-private partnership that we are talking about with this connecting the Caribbean with the private sector, and we are working with the different agencies that are going to be required in the new administration. So this week, Governor Bryant and other representatives, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, are in Washington meeting with members of the upcoming incoming administration and the current administration to try to look at how do we survive in the diaspora of the Caribbean being a U.S. territory and other matters that directly relate to what we're doing. So in that regard, the key people that have been announced so far are Jameson Greer is the U.S. Incoming trade representative, and he was the former chief of staff in that trade department. We also, that was announced today, was Peter Navarro. Now, Peter was the senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, and he was the former key trade aide in the administration. And finally, Howard Lutnick has been named as to go for confirmation as the head of the Commerce Department, and that they are in charge of all U.S. trade relations. So the fundamental aspect that we need to look at is how do we enable the U.S. territory of the Virgin Islands that has a separate customs jurisdiction to facilitate the internal, intramural aspects of the Caribbean and represent the United States. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us as a nation in the United States, but also for the Caribbean, if we can bridge those barriers and enable free movement of goods and people in the Caribbean.
Absolutely.
Without having that happen. So, Ambassador Thomas, that's how we're trying to look at connecting the dots.
Absolutely. I would love for you to share with the audience uh, the the employment potential that's within the U.S. Virgin Islands, uh, the the size of the infrastructure dollars that are available, and the potential number of people that are needed to really fully execute the very ambitious development of the U.S. Virgin Islands to its next level of development. Very visionary plan. So could you let them know? Because I think most Caribbean governments and people have no idea of what's about to happen in the U.S. Virgin Islands and the tremendous opportunities it's going to create for the region as a whole. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. That's an excellent segue to talking about the challenges that we face.
Yes.
So, independent of the Caribbean, the United States Virgin Islands is a member of the Caribbean, and we are subject to the same hazards that Dr. Thomas talked about in the first segment. So we have hurricanes, for example, and in those hurricanes, we are still suffering from hurricanes Irma and Maria that happened in 2017 in September. And although in the news, let's say from a U.S. perspective, people know about Hurricane Irma that hit the Puerto Rico and caused substantial damage as a Category 4 hurricane. St. Croix was hit by two Category 5 hurricanes the weeks before and virtually had no press coverage in that. Now, the good news is that in the disaster response, the U.S. goes in three phases with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association and agency. And so it's the relief phase, which is full coverage and support to the disaster. Then comes the recovery phase, when in that recovery phase, excuse me, I'm getting an interruption. Sorry. So in the recovery phase, this 10% match is required. And then finally, in the resilience phase, there's a 20% match required. Now, that might seem like good news. However, there are $16 billion of federal aid that's been granted and negotiated with the governor and the United States. So a 20% match of $16 billion is something the territory can afford. So we're looking at different ways to mitigate what that match is, and that has to do with how do we get funding to do that. Now, the implication of $16 billion worth of funds means that we are looking to have our road infrastructure completed and recovered. We have 2 hospitals to build. We have 8 schools and more educational environments that need to be recovered. So there are multiple things with hotels and infrastructure and marinas and port infrastructure that are going to be developed. In developing that, we have a shortage of manpower now. We had a closing of a refinery several years ago, and we need people to come in to operate the refinery as it gets done. We also need people in the construction area. So we need people that have skills and jobs in carpentry, in cement work, in doing electrical work, and doing plumbing. In the past, when we started the refinery back in the 1960s, we got a lot of people that we call coming from Down Island or in the chain. Many people from the Caribbean came in to support the Virgin Islands and became our citizens. So right now we have a community that's made up of original people that were in the Virgin Islands, but then people from Jamaica, from Dominica, from Barbados, from all over the Caribbean have come in already to help, and their families are here. The problem is that we can't freely go back and forth, and we need some relief legally in order to do that. And so those are the things that we have to be able to figure out how to do. how can we become a full member of CARICOM? So we come under those tariffs and these treaties so that we can have people freely move. And since we're in a separate third border of the United States, it doesn't imply that anybody has to be able to have a visa to the United States. So there's very doable things that we can do, Ambassador, to do this, but it's going to require some legislation and some collaboration and cooperation to treat us differently. And I think the fantastic part is that the United States, as a community of people coming together in Europe to form that diaspora in the United States, we have that same ability and same structure, although it's a Caribbean people already. And if we can negotiate that effectively with people such as yourselves that are in those ambassador roles and envoy, Tony Weeks, I think those are the things that we can count on. Jennifer?
Okay, thank you.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Joan and Dr. Thomas, for foundation for the case for the movement of people in the Caribbean, looking at some key factors to help realize this great initiative that we're trying to achieve between the USVI and the rest of the Caribbean nations. So thank you very much for that very thorough, in-depth look at connecting the dots and making the case really for the Caribbean America's single economy. But stay tuned, we'll be right back with In the Spotlight right after these messages.
This is the Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Watch for home prices to keep rising next year. Zillow says U.S. home prices will probably go up just a little over 2.5% in 2025, and the number of homes sold will increase slightly. That's even as mortgage rates will bounce up and down, as Zillow puts it, offering opportunities to refinance each time rates go down. Also watch for more buyers to look at smaller, more modest homes. Interestingly, Zillow says the word cozy is already appearing in more listings as sellers virtue signal that their home is smaller and more affordable. And if you're looking for a bargain, you might consider the Southwest. Zillow says the most buyers markets where terms are generally more favorable for buyers than sellers are in the Southwest right now. And you could be about to see more inventory go on markets there. Zillow also says, though, if mortgage rates go down, that could ignite more competition among buyers and give sellers the upper hand after all. And that's the Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
I'm Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and I proudly represent New York's 9th Congressional District in Central and South Brooklyn, representing one of the most populous and most diverse Caribbean American communities in the United States. As a co-chair of the Caribbean Caucus in the United States House of Representatives, I've been an outspoken advocate and legislator who has made the U.S.-Caribbean relationship one of my top priorities. I've worked with my colleagues to strengthen the economic and social ties between the United States and the CARICOM nations and its diaspora. As we march forward into the 21st century, America must continue to employ a consistent and productive dialogue with Caribbean nations in order to adequately address the challenges that face our Western Hemisphere now and into the future. A nation is essentially nothing without its trusted allies, and there's no denying that the United States' long-standing connection to the Caribbean through immigration, tourism, trade, culture, and too much more to list make it the special, strategic, important relationship that it is today. However, In securing that relationship, it is imperative that a comprehensive approach that capitalizes on partnerships between the private sector and governments are secured to overcome the crises and hardships of the coming years. I believe the private sector has a considerable role in fostering community development that is as sustainable as it is all-encompassing, particularly when it comes to ensuring capital reaches Caribbean communities, families, and across the diaspora. Effects from the COVID-19 pandemic has left the Caribbean community in economic, social, and political despair, causing many countries to struggle with protracted economic recoveries as they rely on global investments, trade, and tourism. That is why, as neighbors, we must invest in the stabilization of the region to not only bring about peace, but to unleash an era of prosperity that improves the lives of those residing in the Caribbean region. Know that I will never cease my unwavering advocacy and leadership among my colleagues in Congress to deliver economic relief and build partnerships within the Caribbean region.
Welcome back to Connect Caribbean Report. We're in the spotlight. You just heard from Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke, Democrat, member of the U.S. House of Representatives and co-chair of the Congressional Caribbean Caucus, making some remarks to delegates at an investment summit about 2 years ago in Barbados. But joining me in the spotlight is Mr. Anthony Weeks. He's the Governor Albert Bynes Jr.'s appointed Special Economic Envoy, de facto ambassador to Taiwan and the Asia Pacific region. He is the co-founder and president, CEO, and managing director of CDKs and founder of executive producer of the Kalaloo Alliance Media Hour Network. So glad you can join me here today in the spotlight on today's program. Welcome, Anthony.
Well, glad to be with you today, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you. Well, we just heard from the Congresswoman, and I wanted to highlight some specific statements that she made for your feedback in your capacity as founder of CASE. Time permitting, we hope that we can cover all of the questions. But she stated, America must continue to employ a consistent and productive dialogue with Caribbean nations. She also spoke to the U.S. commitment to Caribbean development and strengthening of the U.S.-CARICOM relationship. She spoke to the United States' longstanding connection and the special strategic important relationship to the Caribbean through immigration, tourism, and trade. And finally, she put forward the case that as neighbors, meaning the U.S., we must invest in the stabilization of the region to not only bring about peace, but to unleash an era of prosperity that improves the lives of those residing in the Caribbean region. So I want to talk about fostering U.S.-Caribbean collaboration for economic growth, leveraging partnerships between private sector and governments, and connecting people and opportunities. So in terms of fostering U.S.-Caribbean collaboration, Anthony, for economic growth, Congresswoman, she emphasized the importance of the U.S. commitment to Caribbean development and its strategic relationship with the region and CARICOM. So my question to you, as the founder of CD and Caribbean, America's single economy, playing a role in fostering this, how do you see CD playing a role in fostering this collaboration to drive the movement of people and economic growth across the region?
Thank you for that question. But let me just to reinforce an important point here. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke is one of the co-sponsors of the bill that was passed in 2016 in Congress. Primary sponsor was Congressman Elliot Engel, and it's called the U.S. Strategic Engagement Act in the Caribbean. And when you think of why is that important, why is that so critical to this matter? The third border, the Caribbean is the third border. And there are fundamentally about a half a dozen areas that are of critical importance, but most important is the issue of national security. And so the Department of State, which is responsible for the administration of this law, the areas that specifically that is baked into this law is you have security, diplomacy, prosperity, energy, education, and health. But if you notice, security was the first point of reference. There's a vested interest by the United States to protect its third border. And when you speak of issue of stability, if you do not help to reinforce and support and encourage and build up your neighbors, they become a weak link in that chain. So we have an important responsibility to coexist with our neighbors and to ensure that our neighbors are prospering as well. And so when you think of Congresswoman Eva Clark and what she's doing, that is a result of years of work coming out of the United States, particularly out of the New York district, where you have former Congressman Elliot Engel, who was a former congressman from New York, and Yvette Clarke from New York. And so there's a theme here. And then, of course, Florida plays an important role because of the Caribbean diaspora. But, like she said, we have been working, particularly myself, I've been working for a very long time, going back since the 1980s, the high 1980s, where we have fostered and forged relationship and host multinational business conferences in every Caribbean island. And Yvette's mom, former Congressman Charlie Rangel, and others were part of that contingent of folks meeting every year to talk about how do we create economic prosperity and security in the region.
Yeah, thank you for that response, Anthony. But she also mentioned about a comprehensive approach to capitalizing on partnerships between the private sector and government. So before our time goes, how does CASE leverage these partnerships to ensure the free movement of people and their contribution to economic development within the framework of a single Caribbean economy?
Right. So for the benefit of the audience, SETI CASE represents two components. The acronym SETI stands for St. Croix Economic Development Initiative, that speaks to specifically the U.S. Virgin Islands economy. CASE represents the Caribbean American single economies, which speaks to the wider region. And bringing the two together speaks to allowing both public and private sector to work together in concert to be able to foster an environment to facilitate more trade on both sides of the equation. The reason why the U.S. Virgin Islands is a natural partner in this endeavor is because we are U.S. territory, and we're strategically located as a logical hub in the center of the archipelago. So when you talk about bringing private sector industries together, SETI CASE, which we are a private sector macroeconomic development think tank, working closely with government and private sector to be able to facilitate the interaction, the cooperation and exchange of the flow of trade and commerce between the U.S. Virgin Islands, the United States, and the Caribbean.
Thank you. I see that we don't have much time left, actually. The time is gone, but if there's opportunity in Connected Voices, when we speak about the unified approach to economic growth and integration, especially workforce integration, I note that the Shipyard LLC estimates a minimum of 550 workers, and depending on the yard's final size, you're envisioning an estimated workforce of 1,000 to 2,000 workers. And I'm wondering, does St. Croix have the capacity to meet the human capital? And how does CD and CASE see the integration of the rest of the Caribbean in terms of the workforce and the migration and so forth of people and the labor force contributing to this need for over 2,000 workers? But I know that we don't have time. I hope that we can address it in the upcoming Connected Voices and to get your take on that perspective. But we'll come back in Connected Voices just after this segment to address upcoming summit and to talk a little bit more about the issues we've raised in the other segments. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Reimagine a world where the Caribbean is seamlessly connected, where our people, our cultures, and our economies move freely across the islands. This is Connect Caribbean, more than a ferry service. It's the heartbeat of a new era, an era where economic opportunities expand, where trade flows freely across our seas, and cultural exchange flourishes. We are linking businesses, empowering communities, and reigniting the hope for a truly integrated Caribbean. Together, we're shaping a brighter, more unified future for the Caribbean. Connect Caribbean, connecting our islands, our people, our
Welcome back to Connect Caribbean Report. We're in the segment Connected Voices, and joining us is Carolyn E. Howell, CDK's Managing Director and Team Leader in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, DMV area. She is the Executive Producer of CFN and the Founder CEO of Events USA. Thank you for joining us, Carolyn. Could you repeat that?
Thank you so much for having me here, and I apologize for
You're
that.
so welcome. You're here to share about the upcoming CDK's 2025 Economic Summit. The 2025 Economic Summit will be the official unveiling of CASE and investment event forum. I have that correct?
Exactly, and we're really, really excited about this. This is the second annual CDK Summit. Last year, we actually held it in St. Croix. It was exceptional. It brought together business owners, private business owners, entrepreneurs, investors, not just from the Virgin Islands, but many flew in from literally from the mainland and from other places in the world just to get together. And this year's summit, I'm so pleased. It's the annual economic summit. It is the USVI Caribbean Americas Single Economy Making the Case Summit. So that's going to be on Monday, April 7th, 2025, and it's going to be in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're so pleased to be at the Alan B. Levin NSU Broward Center of Innovation. So being there in that amazing site to be able to welcome not just individuals from the Virgin Islands, but those from all over the world, it's really something we're looking very much forward to. It's a one-day power summit, and for a very good reason.
So tell us quickly, where can potential delegates go to sign up and register for this event?
Well, thank you so much. We are going to be launching that. It's actually on the website, the CDK website. We'll be putting information out in that with a press release. Also, we have a piece of digital collaboration that we'll be putting out, collateral rather, that we'll be putting out for individuals to be able to get the information, because we want you to be able to come if you are an entrepreneur, a private business owner, and really every segment. There are so many things that can be done in the Virgin Islands, and this summit is there for them. Obviously, we have 3 areas that we're really interested in, which is the transportation hub and supply chain logistics is going to be a big topic there. The capital markets formation and structure is going to be a big topic there. And always the technology hub and global ecosystem. Those are topics that we're going to cover. So if you have any businesses that align, but even beyond that, there is so much more. So we'll be dropping that link and that information very soon and featuring it here on the network.
Thank you very much for giving us an update. It's a very timely summit, and it can happen at a much better time. But I want to bring in the rest of the team, because we left off with some conversations that I want us to touch back on. And this quickly to Anthony, based on the question that I asked you before we close out in the segment in Connected Voices. And if you could recall what I stated there, I wanted to find out how the city plans to facilitate the movement of people, for example, with the shipyard and over 2,000 workforce labor that is needed. Because obviously we're talking about unlocking new opportunities and to drive economic progress within the USVI and across the region. So could you give us a little feedback there on the question that I posed in the closing?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jennifer. So it's safe to say that around the world, the available labor pool, labor workforce, always has to be supported or augmented. I don't care what country you're in. It's always a problem getting the required manpower you need to support major projects. We have a legacy situation in St. Croix for 50 years where we had one of the world's largest oil refinery generating $11 billion a year. A lot of the manpower and the workforce that supported it were folks that came from the Caribbean. So you had local Virgin Islanders who were born and raised and live in the Virgin Islands, but there were not enough to support the labor requirement, the manpower requirement for the refinery. So you had folks from Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, Antigua, and the rest of the Caribbean who came into St. Croix, settled in and created a life for themselves and their family, and supported the employment requirement at that refinery. So whether we're talking about the refinery or a major port and shipyard, which are major driver of employment, labor intensive, we're going to require bringing in outside labor force from out throughout the world, throughout the region. And so the fact is, we're going to be able to create economic prosperity with the development of a shipyard as a mega project, among other things in the development process.
Yeah, that sounds very, very good, but I can almost hear, national and persons living in the islands. When you talk about the mindset and the movement of people, some community nationals may face discriminatory, maybe unlawful, unfair treatment from. I mean, it has happened within the Caribbean, and it's no secret. It's being reported in terms of the mindset of persons feeling exclusivity with regards to opportunities within their islands. And this is open to John or any member of the team. How are you going to create that type of education and awareness that demonstrates that this is for the benefit of individual nations? When people think, you're getting our jobs, or how are you going to broach that with the mindset in terms of
I think once you clearly are in the position to articulate and communicate that to the community and demonstrate to the community that the local population, the local labor force and workforce are getting maximum opportunity to participate. Once you communicate that and demonstrate that, I don't think you're going to have that kind of problem, because at the end of the day, remember I said, this is not an unnatural phenomenon in terms of countries and regions around the world bringing in supported workforce to support the development process. So like you said, what's key is education and information and awareness to be able to say to the local residents, while we know that we need to create employment for local residents, we simply don't have the capacity to fulfill all the jobs that are going to be required. So we're going to have to bring in folks from the outside. We do it in the U.S., we do it in Europe, we do it in South America, we do it in Asia. It's not an unnatural phenomenon.
Yeah, if you could add something to that. In fact, as you're sharing this, it brings to mind that there are two other territories within the region that historically have been populated by men and women from the Caribbean. Aruba has a significant population from around the region because of the refinery, so it's part of the culture, and also Panama as well. So many thousands of Caribbean people went to Panama. So my thinking is that with a country like USVI, it's actually within your culture, and I believe that we're about to see a second wave of of men and women coming into the USVI, and now Connect Caribbean would happily move them in and out. So we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah, but Ambassador, I think for me in connecting these dots, there are three issues, okay, and time is our enemy, okay. So what we have to do in getting ready for this summit, the issue is how is this notion of having one single economy being understood by the Caribbean. So we have to get that message out. We have to talk about the hubs. We have to talk about the ability to manage and to build this regional economy. Second is the relationship with the United States, and what Anthony brought up with the act in 2016. And we have to firmly establish the role of the Virgin Islands as the third border, and how that acts with capabilities that we have with our separate customs jurisdiction, the Jones Act, several things that have been in place, but aren't well understood by people in the United States with this jingoism and pride about immigration and those movements, about what happens. And then the third part is what happens in the environment. Now, we are used to having a multicultural environment here, but with the $16 billion and the jobs coming in, it's just not labor. We need skilled professionals. We need people that are carpenters and plumbers and electricians and people that have skills that came in with their refinery. So we have to build the capacity to train the people. So just revealing some of our scars, when we had some of the building of our STEP program coming in and we brought people in, there was resentment among people in the territory because we weren't hiring our local people. But 60% of the people don't graduate from high school and they don't have a GED. So this is some of the things that happen out of the economies. So we can't hire them on federal contracts. So we are trying to establish workforce development kinds of issues where we can have people engaged in GED programs and apprenticeships to work on federal contracts. So that federal contracting procedure where the FEMA money comes in place and the things that have to happen here to strengthen our relationship and our ability to have visas for people to come in, because our people in our diverse economy here, we can't communicate effectively with our families. So if you have family in Barbados, they can't come back and forth frequently because they need visas. And same thing with the other people. So we have, yes, as Anthony Weeks pointed out, we have a diverse Caribbean community here. But that community is hobbled because we can't freely move within the Caribbean. So those are the three things. How do we get that word out among the Caribbean to change the economic environment with SETI Case? How do we do that internally into the Virgin Islands? And how do we get the national support where our governor is doing that right now? And we don't have much time because the summit is going to be the ideal place where people come in to take advantage of what we're talking about. But we have to get this infrastructure settled, and we need to get it done now.
And Jennifer, just like last year's summit, SETI Case did an excellent job of making sure that the USVI Department of Labor, Workforce Development, the EDA, that they were all there. This year, we're inviting every commissioner. We're inviting the University of the Virgin Islands, in particular, their Center for Innovation and Student Success, every department head. So these are all invitees as well, so that they on the ground can answer some of those questions and provide some of the information that lets us know just what they're doing as they work along with this initiative.
There's one, before we wrap up, there's one key thing that we didn't mention, because if you're moving people, if you're moving, workforce employment, you're looking at families, you're looking at housing, the housing stock. Will they be able to facilitate the burgeoning need for families who will be migrating and working in each island, and specifically we're talking about St. Croix. We don't have time to speak to that, but definitely housing and real estate is another factor that comes along with the movement of people and workforce integration.
Well, quickly,
Well, under infrastructure,
capability of doing that. And there's also an aspect known as man camp. Okay, so we have developed those man camps with the refinery, and
that teaching is happening again.
And so we need to increase, exactly as you said, we need to be able to bring the people in, and we need to be able to house them. Mr. Weeks?
Yeah, Jennifer. Yeah, so the key and operative word is investment in infrastructure. And so housing and the housing stock and what would be required is going to be critical. Governor Bryan has a very ambitious housing program where he assists Virgin Islanders, where he provides subsidies for Virgin Islands to become homeowners. And so housing is a critical component, and it's a high priority when it comes to obviously talking about how do we provide affordable housing for the working family in the territory.
Thank you very much, Anthony Weeks. I mean, the problem with this program is never long enough. It's so much to talk about, but we have to wrap up here. But next week will be the final Connect Caribbean report in this series before the program goes on a break for the holiday season. But we'll be back next week to cover key highlights and salient points over the last 10 episodes here on Connect Caribbean report. So we're really looking forward to next week's discussion. But I want to thank my co-hosts and today's guest, Caroline, and our resident guest, Anthony Weeks, for another enlightening and informative show. And I want to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us. But we'll see you next week, 1:30 p.m. AST here on Connect Caribbean Report here on Callaloo Alliance Media, our TV network. Looking forward to Chris Principe joining us again next week. But that's it for now. Good afternoon from Connect Caribbean Report.
Thank you.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel. Our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world. All in one place, RTV.network.